everyone, and welcome back. Week 3 of Roll 2 DMs. I am Josue Melocrit here, joined by Solomon,
Yes,
the one and only. How are you doing, Solomon?
I'm doing fine.
I am very excited for this week.
I'm pretty interested. It's a pretty essential topic.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot about DMs so far, but this week our focus is actually character creation. So for those of you who are here, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
As always, we'll remind you we pick topics every week. We send out a poll on the CUDND Discord. So if you're not a part of that, I think we have a Nightbot set up now.
Yes, and it should be also in the bio. If y'all want to just check out the Google form directly from there, I think you should have a CU like email to be able to like do stuff on the form, but should be open to anyone else.
Heck yeah. So yeah, go ahead and join the Discord, exclamation Discord,
Yes.
if you want to join. I've put it in the chat just now if you're tuned in. Oh, the white balance is doing its bullshit.
Oh
Anyway,
no! Who turned on the lights? Oh.
the our camera has been not cooperating. If you want to move it down a little bit,
It's
but
been a-
in any case, the show must go on.
Yes.
So we will continue chatting. So character creation.
Character creation. Yeah.
We got a question about collaborating with DMs and backstory, and character creation comes up a lot with that.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. You can't really play D&D unless you have a character, so it's a pretty essential
Exactly.
part of D&D, I would say.
And this being kind of a DM focused podcast, we are definitely going to talk about the fact that a lot of times DMs do have a lot of agency, can have a lot of agency over character creation, especially as it comes into backstory and working it into your own campaign. So without further ado, I guess we'll roll into the first sort of topic.
Yep.
We're going to start from the very, very bottom. So the first thing that you generally do when looking at a character is choosing race and a
it's-
class.
I guess the first thing to some people is like choosing the name, but like in reality, it's really is first option choose your race, second option choose your class.
Exactly. And we will discuss, some of the changes that are sort of happening in the
Oh yeah, most definitely.
D&D and DMing space around races and ASIs and things like that. So we're not going to get too much into the weeds of statting and min-maxing. That's probably for a different episode entirely.
That will probably be for like roll 2 players.
Yeah, roll to hey, hit us up if you're interested. No, yeah, definitely. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what as a DM and as players we kind of look for when helping, especially new players pick a race and a class.
Oh yeah.
So Solomon, I guess ask you straight up, when you are a player in a campaign and you're
Oh.
starting to make that decision, right, about what you're gonna play, what is your kind of approach? Do you just start digging through the handbook and just like looking at everything again? Because I know you have a pretty good breadth of knowledge of what characters or what races, what classes, and a lot of what the subclasses do, pretty in depth.
Yeah.
So how do you just start to pick and choose what you're gonna roll with for a campaign?
Well, I guess I don't really nowadays, honestly, like I don't even check like the actual player's handbook as much as I just use the like digital ebooks on D&D Beyond, honestly, just because I'm personally, for me, just it's a matter of like taste. I enjoy ebooks more than physical books just because of the ease of access. And like you can really just control F and type in whatever you want, and you'll find it fairly easily like tabulated and like spread out that you don't really have to flip through pages. But yeah, for me, when choosing a character, like I don't really. Depends really on. Sometimes some games are more like narrative focused or more combat focused, or maybe like more gritty, and it's really just I would say like first it kind of depends on the game itself. Because if it's gonna be like a meat grinder, you just throw in like just any type of character that's like has decent stats to fight this thing for like a one shot. It's not gonna be like some really in-depth character who has like 2 pages of backstory.
Yeah, and especially with like meat grinders too.
Yeah.
When you're picking a character, sometimes I know what I do is I'll ask what other people are playing to actually fill gaps.
Oh,
on,
no,
like,
definitely,
making
yeah.
like a strong party composition.
Yeah.
Because normally, like when I'm working with players, they'll ask like, "What are the other people playing?" And I'm like, "Just play whatever you want. If you guys have 7 wizards on like, I'll make it work. As a DM, I will make it function. You don't have to
Yeah.
worry about like combat being super hard because you didn't like pick the right class mix. But when you're going into a meat grinder, that's where you definitely want to think about going in with enough healers, going in with enough people that do
Min-maxing your
damage.
stats for sure.
Exactly,
Yeah.
min-maxing stats, having range, or variance in range too. You want people that are up close and far away.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah,
definitely.
I definitely agree. It matters a lot what kind of campaign you're going into. If you're going in, well, with just a group of friends, and it's going to be something that's either more lore driven or something that's a little bit more relaxed. I definitely like working with my players to shoot for something that's they're gonna have fun with.
Oh yeah.
Because I also know people, and I'm probably guilty of one of those. Some people don't like playing up close fighters.
Yeah, no, melee is an acquired taste for some people,
Oh, yeah.
and the opposite for other people.
And
Shout
dude,
out to Matt if he's watching.
And dude, I literally have a hard time not picking casters because
Yeah.
that's just like
full casters are fun.
they kind of slap. In my last campaign though, I got to multi-class into Paladin, which was like
Oh yeah, Father
super
Ava.
dope.
Yeah, that was a fun character.
For I guess most of the people tuning in. What's up, Matt? Matt in the chat.
Yeah, what's up? He is gamer.
No
Yeah.
longer young geese.
He no longer.
Yeah,
To his
so
third alt of the day. Yes.
kind of talking about some of the classes. Caster sucks. It sucks to be wrong, Matt. Some of the
Also,
classes,
before we should hop into like the rest of the stuff, speaking of meat grinders, we should shout out the whole DM duels.
Ooh,
Yeah,
great
I'm
point.
really excited for that. It's an event that we are kind of me and Kobe kind of like with a bunch of other people kind of came up with yesterday night. Apologies for the late night ping. Also, it was kind of late when you posted it,
Yeah.
but it's a pretty interesting project, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people are gonna throw in. And like I guess a very basic rundown. It's gonna be essentially kind of like Pokemon, honestly. I think someone in the chat, like in general, like mentioned it was pretty similar to just picking out your monsters and battling out with another DM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would almost put it closer to Warhammer.
Oh yeah, true.
If anyone's familiar with Warhammer,
Like war games in general.
yeah,
Honestly.
war games in general. So basically, each DM that's participating is going to build a squad, like a full list of
Kind of like
monsters.
a deck of like
Exactly, like a deck, basically like a deck of monsters. They're gonna put a list together, and they're basically gonna go on one map and fight it out. And we will be doing production, and myself and Solomon will be casting it and commentating along the way. So that'll be pretty exciting. Tune in. I think the broadcast will start around 5:30 MST next week, Thursday.
Time is still varying. Could be 5 to 4.
Yeah.
5:30.
Or around that time. Again, get on the Discord if you aren't already,
Yes.
and get on there. Not just for updates on production, the stream, and all of that, but also for future
Events
We want
in
to keep
general,
doing
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely tune in that. Cool. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
roll into some of the. I guess I'll talk about a little bit about my favorite classes. Obviously, I kind of already revealed that I really like
Full
caster
casters.
based.
Yeah.
Full casters. Clerics, super fun. I love clerics. And I like clerics for two big reasons. One's kind of cheaty. Obviously, I like spellcasting, but number two, I feel like, and this might get into a whole can of worms. We won't dig into this, but religion is a very interesting driver for lore.
Oh no, definitely, most assuredly, especially in D&D with like pantheons and like the like solid truth that there are deities and pantheons that do have active like driving forces on the world. It's a very interesting dialogue in general.
Yeah,
really.
definitely. So, it's interesting, and it really depends on the DM. But especially if you're playing with a DM that has a very fleshed out pantheon, having something like a cleric, obviously put paladin in there, even sorcerers.
Paladins don't have to be religious as much as they have to have like a
Or
conviction.
sorry, warlocks, not sorcerers.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, things like that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like the amount of story elements that you can drive into a cleric. And then obviously a lot of the other caster classes. I haven't messed with Artificer. I know a lot of people that love Artificer. But I really like Warlocks for the same reason. Like that backstory of having.
The slightly edgy like material you can work with is pretty nice.
Exactly.
Like the tortured, like Asimar with the fiend like warlock like pact and like the whole like duality is like it's always a fun.
I guess I'm just tied to my characters having like higher than sugar daddies and moms.
Oh yeah.
I'm all about getting.
They're fun,
powerful.
Yeah.
No, it's a good time.
Most assuredly, they are fun.
And those are really cool too because you can have a lot of very interesting interactions with the player, especially if if you know there's someone that likes that wants to really get into like
Talking
working
to
with their
yeah.
deity and
Yeah.
or their packed monstrosity, whatever it is.
Pack daddy.
Pack daddy.
Yeah.
Getting into your pack daddy. That's true, Matt. I have actually played Warlock in 100. I think I've only played caster classes except for like one meat grinder.
He's 100% of the games. Yes, that is true.
All,
I'm pretty sure one
of
game
them.
lasts like
all one
yeah.
of them. Actually, no, Avernus also.
Yeah, which is 2 sessions.
Avernus session.
Rest in peace, Avernus.
Rest in peace, Avernus.
Shout out to Avernus also, yeah.
But yeah, so I like caster class. I haven't messed a lot with Artificer, but those are the things that I kind of look for. I'm definitely a story player. I like putting a lot of story into my characters. Nothing against melee combat. It's just the idea of spell slinging to me is so sick.
Yeah, no, definitely. In my case, I would say like I'm pretty sure my first actual character that I played with in like a campaign that lasted like more than 2 sessions was an Artificer, which is very hard. I would not recommend personally to start out as an Artificer just because Artificers have a lot of options that can become very overwhelming very fast if you're not used to having lots of options in your gameplay. And it's one of those, for me, I think actually it was initially an invention wizard from like the UAs. I think that got canceled a while ago. But then like I think 2 sessions in, I was like, hey, I think, Kobe was the DM, like, hey, Kobe, could I switch to Artificer because this thing looks cool and stuff. And it's like, yeah, sure. And then like, it was lots of power for like a 3rd level character. You can get a bag of holding, you can get magical items. The versatility and utility that like Artificers have in general is honestly one of the main reasons I like them, because you can do anything really.
Yeah, definitely. Matt mentioning that melee has been hurt in 5e. I think that there is like a bit of an issue with that for sure, because at least for me, looking at a lot of those classes, I almost only am interested in the ones that have some sort of like spell casting prowess or like some sort of like supernatural ability with just the melee fighting. I do like the idea of like, for example, like a sword dancer is a really sick idea.
Oh yeah, blade dancer, yeah.
Something like that. Something if anyone plays League, like a Fiora, like something that's very like of the blade or of whatever. But then that's even getting into almost like the religion thing again, with like the person having a very stringent like what did you call it? You called it like a not an aim, like a goal, or
like a general like I you could say morals, honestly.
Yeah,
like just a set of like a code of ethics, or like in general that kind of like driving force is like a thing that you can benefit from having as a religious character. And the thing is, you don't have to be a cleric to be like religious in D&D.
Exactly.
Just like just have the acolyte background can work really well, or just in general you can be like a barbarian that's like fairly religious. Like I remember my character was like a paladin barbarian of Chord, like Hadi,
yeah,
it was
definitely. It's doing
the light pulse.
We're getting
thing.
Messages from the heavens here. But
it's divine intervention, dude. I'm telling you.
It's real divine intervention hours.
Someone rolled that D100, yeah.
Roll the camera down, I guess. I don't even know.
Yeah, it could be
stand up straighter. This camera is not working with this. Anyway, so let's talk about.
Yeah, maybe if I take up more space, that could make it easier.
We did spend a good amount of time talking about classes, and obviously there's so much to get into. There is tons of stuff to get into classes. I definitely encourage everyone to read through when you're picking a character. I know when I'm picking a character, I usually know where I'm looking, but I'll still give everything a look.
Definitely.
So let's talk about races. We'll talk about, I guess, like the standard, race picking, and then we'll talk about something that you were kind of telling me about last night.
Yesterday. Yeah, that was
some of the changes that
Tasha has introduced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and
honestly, other creators that are like aren't in the main like D&D, like like Wizards of the Coast have also done lots of very interesting work on this.
Definitely. So for me, races a lot of the times are almost full on flavor text. Sometimes, and again, this depends a lot on the campaign. Sometimes, and I'd say actually more often than not, I do shoot to just kind of pick a race that kind of matches my class.
Yeah, like synergizes with it, like Loxodon Cleric.
Exactly. I don't necessarily do a lot of min-maxing when I'm picking characters, but because of like how standard stat boosts with
Oh yeah.
a lot of races work. Sometimes I'll pick up something that'll give just like a little boost to my score
Yeah.
on whatever's important.
Or
Yeah,
sometimes you want, the variant human like feat, and like it works. Like shout out
Mhm.
to the athlete feat.
yeah, exactly. And you can definitely use that in meat grinder party
Oh yeah, no,
compositions.
definitely, yeah.
When you're really min maxing, um, a lot of the small minute details, like even some of the abilities, like how elves don't act, like the meditation, how elves don't
Oh
actually have
yeah,
to
like
sleep.
trance, yeah.
When
Where
you're
like you,
going
yeah.
when you're going into like a long meat grinder where you're gonna have rests, sometimes having that character that doesn't have to stay up,
Definitely, or
up
like
as much.
Warforged with just having constructed like
Yeah, or
they
straight up don't have to
don't
sleep.
sleep and just like Senchi's rest is the proper term for
Right.
it, and like also not having to eat, drink, or sleep is a fairly decent feature for like
Right.
a character if you're going for a certain like flavor or direction. Having something that's scary and weird
Right.
works.
And some I'd say for in terms of like min maxing, some races do have some pretty strong advantages that
Oh, yeah,
synergize really well. So like
half elves, like
yeah.
are very much a very decent option lots of
Yeah.
times for charisma casters.
I mean,
for
having
obvious-
having like for example like the advantage against being charmed,
oh yeah,
like that's insane. Like
in
that
general, like
Fey
as a race,
ancestry,
yeah, no, yeah.
that's really strong. And if
or like
if-
halflings with lucky.
exactly, and then
Yeah.
you also get it's an orc feature, right? The second wind.
Second, I think second one is the fighter feature, but I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, so orcs also
Some in
have
the
a
chat
feature
can
where
drop
when
if
you
they-
get
yeah.
dropped to zero,
You just stand up.
stand up with 1 HP.
Yeah.
Like that can really turn the tide of a fight, especially with like how
Fighter
action
classes,
economy
yeah.
works.
Yeah, no,
with
definitely.
Fighter classes, you just get up and like keep swinging. For
And
a
you can
turn.
also heal yourself, like a very easy like strat is like
relentless endurance.
relentless.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's really strong. It also like in terms of resource management is huge because that means the healer doesn't have to like if you're messing with like optimization, you don't have to worry about your healer going over and being like I have to resuscitate you right now or you die.
I am resuscitated to my
He
own.
is just you are just resuscitated. So races, if you're looking to min max, a lot of times it can make a pretty huge difference. But I'd say in general when I'm picking races, a lot of times it is tied to my backstory. Especially when I'm
definitely for
picking
me
a more
nowadays, yeah.
uncommon race. I know it sounds weird, but like whenever you build or you're going into a world, for example, like a Loxodon, where like there's not a lot of them.
They're kind of out there,
Right,
they're
like
just,
you're not just stuck into Ravnica
Yeah.
where there's just like Loxodons all over the place. That lends itself to like orphan stories
Yes.
or like
Or like a
weird like,
Minotaur, yeah.
descendants. Yeah, like a Minotaur. Like
Both of us. I just
where's
realized both
the-
of us picked like fairly weird races
yeah,
for that game.
exactly.
Like yeah.
Like where did they descend from? There's a lot of like backstory
And then
development.
the
that you
DM can use that backstory to make a total
Oh,
character
yes.
arc, and being like, oh yeah, oh you want to play a Minotaur? Oh, you have this family name. Oh yeah, your whole family ancestral home got destroyed by this evil dragon. He got your motivation right there,
Easy.
I'm like, yeah.
We will talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I did want you to take over though and talk about kind of what Tasha's is doing and what kind
Oh,
of the
yeah.
general Wizards of the Coast / D&D community sort of is kind of moving towards, because there are some things that have kind of become more controversial, with good reason, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the changes that are kind of happening? And again, this is something I was just now learning about because I don't keep up with
Like
the latest
yesterday.
UAs.
Yeah.
I'm really bad about keeping up with my D&D reading.
It used to be UA like a couple of months ago. Now it's just official.
Yeah, now it's not actual official content. So
Yeah.
if you want to chat a little bit about
Oh, yeah,
how like ASIs and race implementation is kind of changing how character building is.
Oh yeah,
is
definitely.
happening.
Like I've been fairly interested in that whole discussion, like from like its beginning, and like I do have mixed feelings about it in general, just because there's the whole discussion of okay, I guess starting out to the key element and like I feel like a more essential part is a bunch of races in like standard D&D 5e, like they have negative racial features, kobolds, orcs have like a negative intelligence, and kobolds having, I'm pretty sure, a negative strength if I'm not mistaken. All those features like they do contribute to portraying some races as having an inherent disadvantage, which obviously in my opinion I don't really feel is like that much of an interesting element for me personally. And like having different types of source books like Eberron or like the the one that Matthew Mercer did. You know, like
Mhm.
those stuff where they switch out that kind of negative, like negative intelligence to just being like a normal race that doesn't have that inherent disadvantage and stuff.
Right.
And also, I guess like a bunch of the stuff that came out nowadays is also in relation to having stuff that's more culturally related versus having to be racially related in terms of ASI boosts, like
Mhm.
having some heritage, or like it makes sense if you're from a culture that values war, values like warlike attributes and like fortitude and that stuff in general. It would be a lot more uh, it would be just it makes sense that you would just not have those like attributes. You just have like the nice ones. You're strong, maybe you have a higher constitution, or if you come from a culture that's more like studious and like has a high like a library as their capital building, like that would be from a more like have an intelligence boost, for instance.
Mhm.
And having that be an option is honestly fairly nice, and I feel like is a very nice kind of like departure from just having it be built into like what you're born into, really.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I remember, I think I was watching an interview with Matt Mercer where he kind of talks about,
Yeah.
this came up with accents,
Oh
actually.
yeah, yeah. Accents also. That's a very good point. Yeah.
And I guess that this also gets into character building, but might get more into like, I guess, ethics. And again, that's not something we're really going to talk about
Oh
right
yeah.
now. But there is a lot of the times for a lot of these races some degree of like negative stereotyping with a lot of the races, which can be, again, it depends on the game with you're playing that you're playing and the group of people you're comfortable with. But
Yeah, definitely.
a lot of the times that leads to a sort of like very a specific kind of box that a lot of the races get put into.
And you get stuck in that kind of box.
Exactly. So
sometimes.
like, for example, orcs are just like made for combat. Dwarves all talk in a Scottish accent, for example.
Oh, that stuff. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Elves having like refined and kind of like
Exactly. They
a bit
always
snotty,
talk like
yeah.
the high British
Yeah.
or whatever. And not to say that there's anything wrong with doing those things. It's just,
Having variation is nice.
yeah, it's kind of limiting. And I think a lot of DMs that kind of move away from that. And again, these are DMs that bother with accents. I know plenty of people that don't mess with
Yeah,
accents.
that's
at all.
totally valid and like a fairly fair
That's cool
like
too.
approach. Yeah.
But especially with like character building, you can kind of do whatever you want. You can build a
Yeah.
dwarf that talks like he's from the south of like Louisiana. You like you
Or
can,
like a Loxodon.
yeah, or like a Loxodon who talks like he's from like upstate New York. I don't even know what accent that was, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
But
It was an accent.
it was an accent.
That's the thing, just making the accent for the character, not making the like character for the accent.
Yeah. So a lot of good stuff definitely that's happening. I guess moral of the story for kind of the mention of Tasha's and all of that is when you're considering races, definitely don't look at, for example, the stat changes that they give you, or the background like the Fey ancestry, and say I have to go with this for developing my character. There's a lot of different things that you can do with every single.
Oh yeah,
race.
definitely. There's lots of options, and luckily, the more 5e continues to like stay, like as being the main thing, the more races are added, the more source books, adventure books, and like supplementary stuff is added. That they're like very much like the initial like starting races that were in like the player's handbook versus what we have now is like almost like triple. I
Yeah,
would say
it's
at
super
least.
expensive.
Yeah.
And you can also just adapt non-playable character races.
Oh
to,
yeah,
to
definitely.
playable
Yeah,
characters.
that's another thing. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So we've kind of touched on it a whole bunch, but we'll move on to kind of the second topic. And Retia in the chat actually had a really good question, so we'll answer that while we're chatting about this. But our second kind of topic that we're going to chat about is developing the backstory for a new character. This gets into a lot of, I guess, like the weeds of, what kind of campaign you're playing in, what the friend group is, or what the player group is that you're playing
definitely.
with. The class that you chose, a lot of that can have a really big impact. So
For sure, yeah.
I will ask you the same way I started with the previous question. When you are going into a campaign, is there like a place that you like starting when you're developing backstories? Is there do you directly reference the world that you're in, or do you kind of roll straight off of the class that you're choosing to play for that campaign, as an example of two things you might be using?
I guess I guess I'll just start with the basis or like assumption that like the game that I'm gonna go into is like has a decent amount of narrative, and that backstories are encouraged as being an element that you would develop. Because yeah, like just on that basis, I would say nowadays, like I guess the more I play D&D, the more I kind of have the vibe of making a character concept or like making a certain like idea. Like I want to play this like anthropologist or like linguist, and like I want him to be like fairly intelligent but also wise to an extent, and then I just look at the races and see like okay, this race would add some flavor and changes the dimensions. So instead of just being a linguist, it would be like a Githzerai linguist, and he would be interested in his like heritage as being a Gith, or like examples of that would be or Hadi is a very good example. Like I just wanted to play like a character who initially started out as being a berserker, and like being like a soldier of like just like in the war fighting for something that he doesn't really believe in, into shifting more into this kind of like slow down and kind of like chill, kind of like guy who just like cracks like dad jokes the most of the times, and like just like relaxes, and then looking at the races and the options I have, I then kind of decide, okay, so Minotaur would work here. Minotaurs are known for being, bred for war, raging. They have those horns. They rush into battle. Like that whole imagery worked. And then he's probably going to be a barbarian because, barbarian rages, is fairly thoughtless to like in some cases. And then shifting that into, he would go into like a druid or a paladin to be, like more, like he just believes in these ideas, or he has an oath to like kind of slow down, relax, not go head first, try to be more collaborative.
So when developing the character, you kind of go for the archetype first. You don't even touch like the race, the class.
I've been trying to do that more often. Sometimes I do like kind of look at the race. I'm like, it would be cool if I made something with this race today. Which I guess I do that sometimes as like a general like not really a hobby as much as like pastime. And I think also if Brendan's watching, you can relate to it sometimes, is you just make like a class or like character for the sake of making one, because it's just like a fun idea you're just building off of, like making this like Loxodon who just has a bunch of natural armor, and like he just benefits from his like racial capabilities, and like amping that up,
right,
and using that as a building block. But most times when I'm making it something for like a campaign or a story, I usually focus on having it just be like the archetype, I guess.
For sure.
How about you, Josue? I know that you've been like playing less, but like, what was your process with like your like previous characters?
When I'm picking a character, I actually generally shoot for the class first.
Interesting.
And it's actually mostly because I haven't played. I've actually really not been a player very much.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll shoot for the class first just to try something different.
Oh yeah.
So
just to feel something new.
just to feel again.
Yeah.
So generally I kind of shoot for a class I haven't played before. I like casters a lot, but if I get the chance to play, I like to explore something different. So I've messed with cleric. I think my first ever character was a paladin. I messed with sorcerer a little bit, a warlock as well. So I've basically touched most of the casters. I haven't played a wizard and artificer, and I guess druid as like the main.
Druids
stack.
are fun. I remember playing. I dipped into druid for like a campaign that I kind of dropped out of at a point, but it was a very fun
Right. And then from there I kind of choose. I usually build my backstory around the class. I do that a lot because I like flavor texting my spells a lot. So like whenever my abilities a lot.
Definitely.
So like when I'm using an ability, I like to think, all right, where and why did my character learn this?
Yeah, like
because I think it's
Fair
like
enough.
a weird concept. Leveling up like in the canon of like a campaign is like kind of a weird thing, right?
Definitely.
You never just like you don't have that like training like anime like training sequence where you went into the woods and you sat there and like developed teleportation, for example. Like
no, definitely.
You just suddenly hit 8th level and you can use teleportation. Like that's
I now know Kung Fu.
You know,
like just start out and being like, I picked up a fighter class. I can now fully use like weapons
right
pretty easily, and like it's I there's some amount of like disjointedness. Like me personally as a DM, I try to, you know, bridge that disjointedness by, you know, asking players, you know, like, hey, if you want to multi-class, let me know and you can work out the, you know, like a moment kind of bridging the gap, you know. Like if you want to be an Eldritch Knight, maybe, you know, you go to the wizards like college and like ask them and stuff, or maybe you like take a certain substance and that like infuses you with the magic that you just know innately.
Right.
And like stuff like you know, I personally I really like bridging and kind of like making the multi classes and like the classes in general make sense to a degree.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, that makes
which is
sense.
it's understandable if you don't want to, because sometimes you don't have enough time in the story to do that, you know.
Yeah. I definitely want to answer Retu's question from earlier too. So
Oh, yeah.
she asked, do you prefer if players bring in a backstory or creating a motivation for the player? So that's a good question. So basically, like you asking a player to like bring a developed story versus like the DM kind of developing that story for them. And I think the big thing there is it depends, and sometimes like I've done both, and it really depends. I've had people that, you know, they ask me, hey, is this race cool? Is this class cool? Do you mind if I do this?
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And then like 2 hours later, they send me like 3 pages of backstory, and I'm like, like this is awesome. Like I'll take it. That's less work for me.
Yeah, no,
'cause then I
definitely.
can like just take it, and if that's what they want
You
their
work with it,
backstory to
yeah.
be, I just take pieces from that and I can shove it into my campaign as needed. Super easy.
No, fair enough, and you don't have to worry about doing something that they might not like because they have the stuff written in their backstory. They might
Right.
as well, you know.
And then there's other times where I've straight up been asked like, hey, I have this bit. I remember one character really distinctly. I wonder if my player's in the chat, he'll know who I'm talking about.
Shout out to the players on the
He
chat.
basically played like a Mysterio copy. Like he basically
Oh, like an illusionist.
he
yeah.
never actually fought. He was
Okay.
usually like a max range illusion from his illusion,
Yeah.
doing stuff through his illusion with like mage hand and stuff.
I'll be honest. For a second, I thought you were talking about Rey Mysterio.
No,
the
no,
WWE
not
Legends.
not the WWE god. No, like the Marvel villain. I think Marvel, right?
He's like in Spider-Man's like rogue gallery.
Yeah, Spider-Man's opponent.
Yeah.
Where his whole shtick was that his character lost his memory,
Oh damn.
and I was like,
Okay.
all right, where do you like?
the complexity.
Do you want to like enlighten me on where he was before, or do you want me to do it for you?
Oh yeah, I love
and,
that stuff.
and he was like, you can make my
Go
past
wild.
whatever
Yeah.
you want, and it basically gave me free agency, and I was like,
That's always
oh
awesome.
baby, this character
Yeah.
arc is gonna be so stupid. Like not stupid and like I'm gonna make your character seem dumb, but like there's just so much I could do in that instant.
Yeah, no,
So
definitely.
I'd say it absolutely depends. I like taking characters' backstories a lot, because usually when a player has a backstory already kind of fleshed out, it means that they want to play that character a certain way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which makes it a lot easier for me to kind of work around them. Again, I as a DM like to give players the funnest, best experience possible. So
Yeah.
if they're putting in the effort to put in a backstory, that makes it really easy for me. At the same time, if someone comes in and just basically has a character that is his class race and that's like it, and they're comfortable playing in a campaign that's very lore heavy, again, I think before we talked
Some people
about
just
like
like listening,
followers
yeah.
and leaders,
yeah.
right?
Or like
in
listeners and
campaigns.
active players. Yeah.
Listeners and active players is the
Yeah.
better way to put it. That they can just be listeners, and they don't have
They're in it
to
for the
delve
ride, you know?
super hard
Yeah.
into their backstory.
Yeah.
And that's
You
totally
don't-
fine
yeah.
too. And I've had it happen too where a player will be like, hey, like I know we didn't develop my character's like backstory that
But
much.
they want
I
to
just
like.
kind of
They're
created.
interested in doing it now.
Can we start, working in
Which is
whatever?
awesome, yeah. I love
Yeah.
I love encouraging like further development and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned like Amnesiac, and like I just remembered. I think starting out my game, like the total number of players who were Amnesiacs, I think is like 3 or 4 by now. Like yeah, I think actually like actively there's like 2, and there was a previous one before, but yeah, it's they're fun to play with because then you can be like, oh, you look at the symbol, roll the history check, oh, this you made this, and like
Yeah.
doing that stuff, yeah, it's always very fun to do.
Yeah. I dig that. I also did want to answer. It's not super on topic, but I did want to answer because this is something that you and I have talked about
Yes.
before. But let me find it real quick. Thoughts on NPCs treating certain races differently, like the book text on tieflings and dragonborns. So
Yeah.
that one, the big thing for me is talk to your DM and talk
Yes.
to your group.
Be sure that
Because-
everyone's comfortable with
Yes.
that.
Because again, you can use D&D for whatever you want. If you
Yeah.
want it
Oh,
to
the
be a
lights.
vessel,
Divine
for-
intervention again. Oh no.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me.
Yeah, maybe.
Um,
Take up more space. Yeah.
To be bigger. I shouldn't have worn a white shirt. That
You
probably
should
didn't
not have.
help.
You failed us.
I rolled my style saving throw. So
I look so much taller than you on the screen now.
you
It's
are
sad.
dog. You
Well, yeah.
kinda are.
Well, no, we look the same. It's okay. Shout out to Philip. He's watching.
So definitely talk to your DM, talk to your group, because you can use D&D for whatever you want.
Definitely,
Whatever you want.
yeah.
If you want to push, morality and social issues and ethics into your game, and you're in a group of people that is very comfortable doing that,
Yes.
so be it. That can be a really interesting point of dialogue.
Yeah,
I
no,
would
for sure.
recommend erring on the safe side. Don't do that if you're going into like a brand new group with people you don't know, and maybe like the DM, but you don't know what the rest of the group is.
You're not sure the
I-
whole vibe, you know.
I
Okay.
personally, as a DM, won't openly do that
Yeah, same.
unless I've talked to that person particularly.
if they're comfortable with that, because
Yeah.
some people just don't want to have racism in their game,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Like it's,
It
it's
is
fine, you know.
essentially
It's,
like,
totally understandable, I would say.
It is essentially lore-driven racism,
Yeah.
and again, it can work really powerfully as
Open up a dialogue and
It
no,
can
for
work
sure.
really well in like a plot development if you have like I've definitely had like religious wars in my campaigns
yeah.
like in the past in the lore. It can create some interesting tension, but that's not, for one, it's not necessary. You don't need to make your campaign super grim dark. The people are still low-key racist, people are low-key like religious
Or
zealots,
high key sometimes.
or
also.
high key. So I would say for that in particular, it really
Depends on the
If-
whole vibe. Really.
If your campaign
Yeah.
is feeling that and that's something that y'all are about, go for it. I'd recommend not doing it with new groups. Make sure
Yes.
that you're chill with everyone in your party
Exactly.
before you do anything like that. Because generally, I would say like in general, for an NPC to do that means that the DM is making a very conscious decision to make that NPC target
Definitely.
a race, and that immediately leads to contention with people who aren't comfortable with it. So
Yes.
I would say first and foremost, I wouldn't recommend it to DMs who are just DMing brand new people that
Like
they
for
don't
fresh
know.
players, especially, or like new players.
Yeah,
also.
or a new player, even if
Yeah.
it's like a group of like loosely associated people that you might know but don't know very well, I would avoid it. If that's something that's happening in your game that you're not comfortable with, talk to your DM.
Definitely.
Always
Player consent is very important in this.
definitely
Case,
like a broken record at this point, but
Yeah.
if there's anything you're not comfortable with in your game, even if it's
let
just
your
like the
GM know.
style of game, or like
Yeah.
you don't like the combat or something,
Or if you
just
want
chat
more
with your DM.
combat, shout out to Matt.
yeah, or if you need more meat grinding in the
Yes.
game.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
Talk to your DM.
I think that goes back to like the golden rule. If everyone in the table is having fun and is okay doing it, then go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
You know, like as long as everyone's like the DM and the players are all in the same agreement on like the the DM provides and the players accept happily, then it's good. You know.
This is getting into some harder questions, so I will touch on like our personal opinions
Oh.
on this.
Jesse.
Jesse. I'm not going
Jesse.
to try and pronounce your on-screen name.
Initiative
Um,
in reverse.
Asking
I think,
in
yeah.
the chat, how do you tackle a player bringing and playing themselves racist if they're the only racist person right now?
Talk to them.
I would say that person is just in general. The DM needs to talk to that person,
Yeah.
because that, again, we're getting into the point, into like the territory
Discussion and just,
of it
yeah.
being like questionable, especially with new players. That's something that's very questionable. So, again, if you're not comfortable with it, I would talk to the DM, because the DM, I mean, at that point, this is something I would recommend. If a player is trying to do that, the DM should know about it beforehand, and the DM needs to talk with not just the player,
Other
but
players
also the other
the whole
players.
party in general. I feel.
Or if you're the DM and you're completely uncomfortable with it, and it's something that you didn't talk about with the player, I would say at least start with a stern warning. Talk to them about it. But yeah, don't be. And this is something that it sounds awful, but it's for the better of a lot of campaigns. If you're a DM and you have a player that's really not working or vibing with your campaign, you don't need to have them there. I'm not here to say if you don't like someone in your campaign and they're not working, kick them immediately. But obviously there needs to be dialogue with everyone. Talk to people, because while
Open discussion is very important.
while it is a very valid, again, it is a valid backstory. There's
Yeah.
if you're looking at a world at a world like D&D, or like settings in D&D,
Especially
from
like
like
the standard
perspective-
Forgotten Realms setting
exactly
has like some examples of that. And, you know.
Yeah, if you're looking through that lens, like, that is to be expected. But whether you need to bring it into that game, first of all, as a player, you should consider whether that's really something that you need to bring into that game that other people. You have to consider as a player whether other people are going to enjoy playing with your
Yes.
character. And it's the same way that as a DM, you have to think about where like the kind of situations you're putting your players in. Make sure that everyone's having fun and enjoying it, and take a second to think, do I really need to put my character in this situation? So that, like, for the betterment of the campaign, for the party, for the players, because a lot of times it can lead to a lot of like issues. But yeah, I agree, Matt. Honestly, being absolutely honest as a
Yes.
player and a DM is
Clear
like,
communication is very much essential.
the best way to go about it 100% of the time. Cool. So kind of back onto what we were talking about before, with developing backstory. I guess that sort of tied into it for sure.
Yeah, no.
When developing backstory too, one thing I like to think about is where my character can go. You already kind of talked about, like, ooh, maybe I can multi-class this later and kind of change.
Having like a blueprint
Exactly.
is sometimes helpful, yeah.
Yeah, so I like to think about my character's backstories in the context of, once I have like the basis, I then look at the campaign. And I look at the campaign, and if the campaign is, for example, like a god level epic.
Oh
then
yeah,
I'm
like
thinking
Heroes
about,
of the
like,
Realm.
exactly.
You know, like you are the main like character group. You are the heroes. You know, if you are not there, the whole world falls into disrepair, and Tiamat rises. All the demon lords like have a potluck, and like it's gonna be
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking at something like that, I think about my character from like the development of his power level, because obviously if you're gonna make a lot of big jumps in levels, I like to consider, and I mentioned this before, I like to consider how my character is getting there.
Oh yeah.
Because my character isn't just gonna, again, he's not just gonna randomly pick up all these new spells and like just say,
Like in his free time, he's gonna be like practicing writing up formulas. For a
Right.
wizard, for instance.
Yeah.
Like you write. During your spare time, you'll be expected to perhaps like be writing a couple spells and have some ideas. And once you level up, you kind of realize, oh yeah, I'm strong. I've trained enough. I've done enough that I can do this.
Yeah. And spell choice, like, again, going back to me liking casters.
Yeah. No.
Spell choice comes a lot with
Shout
that.
out to
For example,
casters.
if you're playing a life cleric and you get the option to like pick up a necromancy spell,
It's kind of
like
it's a
how does
decision,
your character feel, like, actually
How do
feel
you
about
rationalize that as a
Exactly.
character? Yeah.
like, as a life cleric, your whole thing is like keeping people alive.
Yeah.
But in a lot of situations, I guess it really depends on how you've built the archetype of the structure of the religion, right? But like that might be something pretty questionable if you're adding that spell. You're
Changing life and life and death
Exactly.
is a fairly like interesting topic to discuss in general. Like some characters may just not take any like raise dead or like revivify. They might not just take those spells because maybe their god doesn't believe in like going back from dead.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And obviously with the class, it says you learn these spells.
Yeah.
But whether you prepare them or not, or whether you decide to use them or not.
And that depends on the caster also. 'Cause
Exactly.
Some of them are stuck with it, like wizards.
Exactly.
You just got your book.
So yeah, that's one thing to consider. That's something that I like to consider is like what is my character doing, especially when I get into multi-classing too. Again, multi-classing for flavor text is my favorite thing.
Oh yeah. No,
Going
for sure.
back to Father
Paladin,
Abba, this like
yeah.
Loxodon cleric, right? It got to a point where he was all about peace and like life cleric, like your quintessential life cleric. And then it became clear that violence has to be part of the answer.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing when you're fighting like near like godlike enemies, and like you're facing like an Avengers level threat. It's you're definitely gonna have to like. That's I guess a key thing also is that lots of games do have the fact that you as a player must commit violence to advance the plot.
Yeah.
And and that's the thing where it's obviously about like whether your players want to do that, but it is a fairly common and classical way of doing it. You go through the dungeon to save the princess.
Right.
And like with other games, you know, you gotta talk to the dungeon master or like the actual physical dungeon master in the dungeon and be like, hey, can I slip you like 10 gold and you can let me in? You know, like it depends on the game. You know, some games just work like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I did want to ask you. So when you're getting into that late game,
Oh yeah.
How do you keep up steam with your lore for players? So that's
How
to say, so when you start a campaign, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the times, a lot of the work happens in the background.
Oh yeah.
Where
Yeah, for
like
sure.
it's just kind of set in stone and like this is what the character is.
The
As
cogs
the
are
character
turning, yeah.
exactly as the character progresses, or I guess I'll say that you make the cogs. How do you keep them turning throughout the campaign? So like you like delve into the character's backstory a little bit at the beginning. How do you keep it rolling? How do you keep adding content as a DM to keep players engaged? Because
I get you.
we use varying
yeah.
party sizes, so like there's a lot of characters to keep track of. How do you make the efforts to continue developing someone's backstory if that's something that they're interested in?
And I guess that kind of goes into like the like final topic, which is like collaboration, right?
Yeah.
So like yeah, it's like you know having that whole you know like kind of general like you know especially if the game is narrative focused, having that kind of I guess for me personally I like to set up stuff and you know like be like okay this person they have this backstory of you know they were you know like adopted by this Rakshasa who used them to like be you know like a criminal and like you know an assassin and stuff and they run away and stuff and they're you know they think they're safe. They're in the city. They're pursuing this life as a bounty hunter, and then they encounter the party. And along with the party, they become stronger, more skilled, more renowned. At a certain point, you would just logically conclude, perhaps, or I guess in my head, I would conclude: the more famous the characters get, the more eyes on them, the more word travels around about this group of people. And you know, like if this Rakshasa has you know like a hit out on that person. Or you know if they you know like are like you know they're hanging out to like a Rakshasa bar and like they hear from another guy like hey did you see this like Tabaxi he's like hunting he's with this huge party and stuff. It's gonna make the Rakshasa turn gears and you're like be like you know what maybe it's time for payback. You know, maybe it's time to like, you know, like
had enough.
Yeah, like get back, you know, like what I lost, or you know, or take revenge to an extent, and you know, like have that built in or kind of like lead in the game is like a nice element, honestly.
Yeah.
And it just you know, or yeah, I really do use character progression and like power and like fame or like being infamous to like push those factors and pull people together. Or sometimes just you know it just makes sense you know that you're walking around in this like marketplace and you can see the figure of this warforged that's almost a replica of yourself you know you being a warforged except it's like larger and the face is almost the same and you instantly get this like feeling of fight or flight like you're seeing you know like your like mirror image that's gonna you know like hunt you down and stuff.
I'm
you know?
definitely guilty of, and this is like my favorite thing that I like to do. This is especially nice when they give me somewhat vague backstories.
Oh yeah, I love doing that too.
Where like I'll just like
blindside them. Yeah.
I'll just like pull little details, like stuff they might have even forgotten that they were written about, and they're like they walk into like a crowd or something, or they're out for a hit.
Oh yeah.
On someone that they don't know what they look like, and then they arrive there. They know where the target is supposed to be, and it's someone that they know, someone from their backstory. Like I'll start to describe it. I'll be like, you see this figure and a very recognized, you know, whatever, like a very familiar beard turns and looks at you and with a very familiar accent says hello again, and like it's someone that they have to like start thinking back to their backstory.
And then they do the whole face palm where like you know just like oh my god.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I did that with one of my players where I turned one of their like friends from like their backstory like origin story kind of thing into the big bad. I feel bad. I still feel bad. I actually did it this week. It was like it was like a very like honestly yeah it's kind of sometimes it feels like a cheap shot and like it's because it does do that instant like satisfaction as a DM of like pulling the rug under your characters to like you know especially if they set this up as being oh yeah this is my friend like we're you know all like in this unit together and you know I wake up and like I don't find him, he's disappeared. I you know try to cast sending to him. He receives the message but doesn't respond, and then you know like oh no, there's this guy that's attacking you. He has this mask on his face. You know he shoots at you, and you know he has this like you know like all this like essentially building him up in that case, and then they try to hunt this person down. And after a certain encounter, I think I literally just put like some kind of you know. I think it was like this melodramatic kind of music and like beginning like crescendo on a piano, and just at like the pinnacle, I just you like reveal that they say something, and then like I certainly like essentially like I think it was like yeah, the herald will know your name, and then he responds like, oh, she certainly does, and like then he kind of, and then the person clicks, oh, this is my friend, this is the person that was like with me in my childhood, and like that reveal is just always feels good.
So it just came to me that I definitely got ahead of myself, so we'll roll over with the last topic card because we're pretty much fully into it, and it's DM character backstory collaboration. And so this is something that it varies depending. I will definitely answer Jesse's question, or not Jesse's question, Redty's question, sorry, about doing stuff with characters that don't have motivation or passive players.
Oh, yeah.
We kind of talked about this in the previous
We
episode.
touched on it to an extent, like listeners and, like giving them their bits, giving their like time.
So I would say with characters that don't have motivation or passive players, one thing to avoid as a DM is not forcing motivations on them. That's something really important because that basically gets to the point where you as a DM are putting in effort to add them into the story, really give them fuel for their character's fire, and then them just like kind of not taking it. So I would say just be wary of not forcing motivations onto them.
Talk to them. Be like, are you willing to accept this?
Absolutely talk to your player. And this is something that you need to do because some players have a lot of fun not taking part in your lore.
Just being along for the ride.
That sounds awful. But
yeah.
some players are not going to care.
They
how
enjoy
much
watching other people's drama.
Exactly.
They'd rather not have their own drama.
Exactly. They're there to, like as Solomon said, along for the ride. They're just kind of like vibing. They're just like down to like watch what the hell happens. Why did this guy's dad do this
exactly?
And that?
And they're like, oh, wow. It's like watching a movie to an extent.
Exactly.
Except you're an active, you are in the movie, and like you're in the it's like you're in the live audience to an extent.
Yeah.
And it's not like bad. You can react. You can and you can have your own spotlights if you want to. And if the DM and if the DM and the player want to, you can have your back burner stuff. Like, oh, this stone faced like fighter who doesn't talk that much. Slowly through the game he gets more personality and he gets more active role and stuff, and like it's that development is fine and it's not necessary, but it's also like it's nice to have sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I would ask them if they're having fun.
Yeah.
Like that's the one thing that I had a player that was very new to D&D with a mix of other people that were very experienced and cared a lot about backstory.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I would just kind of like ask them to make sure, because they were very quiet, very passive. And I would ask them like, hey, are you enjoying yourself?
How was the session? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, exactly. Do you need more? I ask questions that are less surrounding them being passive and more about the campaign itself. So like, hey, are you enjoying this? Or do you think there's enough combat? Or like, do you want to be more involved in the lore? Like, kind of mix it up with more general questions. Because a lot of the times you might find that like the player is just there for the other people's drama. They're there to play an interesting character, like from a mechanics perspective. They're there to DPS whenever they're needed, and just kind of sit back and use their spells as they're asked whenever they're not.
Yeah, no, I fully feel with that, and like it's sometimes it's the case that you have enough drama in real life. You don't really want any. You don't want that melodrama and stuff in your games. You just want to relax and have a good time.
Definitely. So Nampi asked, and we chatted a little bit about this, but how do you go about characters with DM played NPCs as part of their backstories?
Oh yeah.
I love this stuff. I abuse people's dreams. Oh my goodness! Every time,
the way you said that was a bit, yeah.
Let me tell you, every time a character falls asleep, you can absolutely destroy their psyche any way you want. It is.
That's a bit cruel.
That is no. I'm not even joking.
Sleep is sacred. I
same guy.
That.
The guy that did the Mysterio.
Oh, he's having
character.
those like flashback dreams.
Well, he had like a greater like one of the Lovecraftian style entities.
Like the old one.
And so I loved that from the perspective. Sometimes when he fell asleep or when he meditated or when he tried to like really anything where the character like stops paying attention, I'm like,
yeah, my time to strike.
And that's like where I get kind of creative with my storytelling.
No, for sure.
I remember the way that I described every time he interacted with it was he was standing in like an infinite pool of reflective water with the sky reflecting black below him, such that like you couldn't see the end, but you also couldn't tell which way was up, other than the fact that you were probably standing right side up.
You can feel gravity to an extent.
And then the sky slowly got covered with eyes. It was like a many-eyed entity. It was like a seer entity.
I'm good.
And then it got even more. It was brutal. I really
You went
enjoyed
ham with that description.
coming up with these descriptions.
Imagery. Yeah.
Also, what happened was when he got more in touch with it, he saw more of it. So like the eyes, there was more eyes. There was a higher density, and then
the more he levels
point,
up, the more he like gets into the story.
At one point, the sky itself started, like the eyes that were making up the sky as basically stars, started splitting the sky, and that was the deity's mouth, like talking the sky.
Okay.
Like, so I guess literally Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Bloodborne is a great source of inspiration for that kind of like
no, literally,
shit.
You can put in like the old ones chant, or like I forgot the exact one. Yeah, shout out to Matt for putting me on that like beta soundtrack thing. That I use that a lot.
Yeah, and so getting back to soundtrack too, because I love giving my characters
motifs. You mentioned that before. Yeah.
Musical motifs.
Yeah.
That's something we're getting kind of into the weeds, I guess, of like backstory, but that's something that I really love doing, and I don't necessarily talk to my players about it. It's just something that I like to do stylistically, so that they sometimes catch on. Whenever he interacted with this deity, it was basically the same somber, sort of dark, but like weirdly almost like melodic, bright sort of sound, because it was supposed to be like a really the idea, again, getting like really like in my writer head, but the idea was that I wanted it to be a very dark setting, but that was still a place of comfort for this character.
I get
if you know what I'm talking about.
You.
In terms of NPC, so basically for me, I played that entity as a sort of NPC. So it depends on the character. Some people really like interacting with their deity, and so I'm happy to play the deity as needed, or play vessels of that deity. How often do you implement specific NPCs for people's backstories?
I like doing that.
Yeah.
No, I remember like.
I think this is a hard question for us, because we're like on the same page. We actually love developing NPCs for our players' backstories.
I understand that lots of players are like a bunch of games, have that kind of the gods don't really care about you; they have bigger fish to fry thing. But like it's an understandable approach, Like if you're like a level 3 cleric, you're not gonna be able to commune with your god every single day. He has other people on Skype. So like it's but if you're playing a warlock and you pick a patron that like maybe I homebrewed, or maybe like is like a certain one that would fit with your backstory,
right?
I do love establishing those as being like not really like having your patrons have a personality and have a being able to talk to your patrons. Like being able to commune with them is, I feel like, a very interesting way to approach both your own your character development and kind of like evolving and further adding complexity to your patron. Mm-hmm. Like I have 3 warlocks in my party. The thing is, all 3 of them. Well, I used to have 3. Now it's just down to. Yeah, now down to 2.
How many have you killed, my lord?
No. It's not killed as much. I'm double checking that I'm not miscounting. But
I got tired of playing their NPC, so I just killed the character.
Well, no, dude, I love that one actually. It was inspired by like Dishonored, like the Outsider from Dishonored. Such a good game. But yeah, essentially so I guess counting the total number of warlocks, 3 warlocks, all 3 of them had very different patrons. One was a physical person that existed in a nightclub. I guess not really spoilers now, because I think last session there was a spoiler. There was like a lore dump where everyone like talked about that stuff. I'm not worried now about like talking about it. Like one was like literally like like a celestial patron that ran a nightclub, and one of them was like a genie in a violin, which is like a twist on Genie in the Box, like a Genie in the Lamp. But yeah, and the third one was this kind of like
you play a Geno.
No. And the third one was, this kind of like otherworldly, actual, like physical patron, like this person that visits you in your dreams and you can talk to in its own like separate like realm almost. And this realm was like kind of embodied by like having this like pitch black sand, this endless like sea of like toiling.
It's always the endless. I guess like long story
short,
it's always an endless sea.
Well, to be fair, the character was playing like a surfer character. So it fits to this to some degree, and like having like these whales flying in the sky and stuff, and like this kind of like otherworldly imagery, and like I picked a certain soundtrack that was like from I think it was from Dishonored, like one of the Dishonored DLCs,
Mm.
and like it was like this like venturing into the void kind of thing, and like it gave that vibe of being this otherworldly place that's not like frightening or like anxiety inducing as much as it is. You're comfortable in this place because you know you're safe because your patron is here. He's the person providing you power, but you also know that this is not natural.
Right.
This is not like the average person would probably shit their pants being in this place.
Right.
It's not really a normal place, but you, given your circumstances in your life, have pushed you to this patron. And I kind of love doing those twists and those like generally like stuff and yeah.
Well, one thing that I did, and this was during the last campaign that again isn't finished.
Yeah,
and
Jesse, you
I
need
don't
to play
know-
Dishonored.
I don't know
yeah.
if it'll ever finish.
Shout out to the
table-
players.
table
Yeah,
three.
table
Shout out to
3.
Table 3, baby. But I put them basically on an island where I told them there's a magic field like in the island where your magic isn't working the same. Something is off about it.
Timey-wimey stuff.
Yes. So I basically just stuck like there was like whenever the sand picked up on the beach, I basically just give people different visions of like their past or like different
dude.
things that they've seen.
That beach episode,
And,
but like twist.
Oh man, I'm not gonna talk about it because it's still kind of like an inside joke. Have I told you about that session where
I don't
some
think
players
so.
didn't show up,
Really?
but we?
I don't think
but
I've talked
a
about-
bunch
no.
of people got. Well, I'll have to tell you about it because it was
Yeah, no,
insane.
definitely.
But anyways, basically something happened that most of the players don't remember.
And then like
and in
since players didn't
actuality,
show up. my
they actually
God.
don't know what happened.
Okay, that's so funny. That's
It
actually
was
pretty
just-
interesting.
It wasn't really like taking content away. It was just basically I played a one shot when we were missing a bunch of people,
That had a bunch of visions and stuff.
and then there was essentially a mind
voice
wipe
chat.
at the end of that voice chat. Or at the
Interesting.
end of that voice chat. At the end of that session. I don't know why
Yeah.
I said voice chat.
I think because it was in VC. Was this during online?
No, this was in person.
Oh, the last in-person session.
So basically, there was
Yeah.
this issue that there was a big issue that they created.
A conflict.
A conflict.
Yeah.
Uh,
a predicament.
they were in quite the pickle, but they got mind wiped. So the people that didn't show up to the session, they never knew about it. So they were canon mind wiped because
Nice.
there's no way they could
That's-
remember they weren't there.
That's always a fun approach,
So that was like one of the more meta things I've ever done. I don't usually ever do
And
things like
you can
that.
have the players converse afterwards, and then there's the thing of the player's perspective and what they remember,
Yeah.
talking to other people.
Yeah,
and all that
so
stuff is very
well,
fun.
the way I set it up as was I basically had some of the people that were mind wiped that didn't remember it. They would see things that happened during the mind wipe, and they're like, "What the hell? Like, what is this?"
Okay.
And like they would describe it to like the other party members, and the other party members
No
would get that
recollection,
itch
yeah.
in the back of their head of
yeah.
like, it's like
This
that.
feels
That
familiar.
sounds like it could be real, but I don't remember it. Yeah, just like dumb meta shit. But like to get to get back to like the NPC stuff, that's actually one of the main ways that I develop backstories for players. Is I give them either an anchor NPC or an anchor encounter type like dreams,
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
where that's just something that they kind of latch onto. So if they're interested in developing that backstory, I know because they're like, I want to talk to like whenever there's any semblance of downtime, they'll be like, I want to talk to X person that I developed, and they're like, okay, they want to know more, or like I
They're
want to
interested
try
in
and
biting
convene
further
with my
into the
god.
hook, yeah.
Like I just leveled up, I'd like to convene with my god.
See what's up.
And like I'll try and pray or whatever, and then you can make it happen. So yeah, definitely NPCs and just characters in your campaign in general, fantastic ways to drive players' plots. In terms of collaboration, this goes again towards the active versus passive, or like listeners versus very active players. Active players tend to be really involved in their backstory. And so those are the people that I will straight up talk to, and I'll be like, what do you want your character to develop?
Oh
divine
no, I gotta
intervention.
stand up again.
Divine intervention.
Oh
time.
no. It's because we were past the 5-minute mark.
Oh no. Yeah, we'll be wrapping up pretty soon, but yeah, basically because the question that we got in the actual form was talking about like player DM collaboration. It depends on how active the player is. If it is one of those really, really active players, I will straight up talk to them after a session and
Be like, yo, do you want to do this?
Yeah, exactly. And be like, hey, there's these options. I've developed this in my world lore. Is this something you want to explore? And they'll kind of talk to me about it. Or some players will straight up ask me, and I encourage you to do this with your DM because I'm pretty sure most DMs are pretty open.
Yeah.
If you just tell them like, hey, I want my character to start
I have this idea for
moving
this arc.
in this direction. Yeah, exactly. Like I
Sometimes
think
being
my
clear with that
character
is
is
nice,
like
yeah.
moving this way. Is there any way we can work on that? And again, don't expect your DM to just be like, "Yes, you are the now the focus of the campaign."
You are now the driver. Here's
Um,
the keys. You
yeah,
know?
exactly. But dialogue with my players is a lot of fun. When it comes to passive players, I don't try and force backstory on them. I'll ask them if it seems pertinent. If not, I will just softly push them in, like I'll like kind of push them along, and I'll invite them. I'll like offer up things like
Put out the bait.
yeah, exactly. Like if there's like a symbol from their like very brief backstory that
Or they see
remember.
someone that they recognize or like
Mhm.
looks weird, or like they know is a person that they can give more lore.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you have the NPC that just he's the side quest NPC for your character. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. It can really just be. It's entirely contingent upon having players that are involved. So, if you're a player, and you are interested in your character doing something,
Talk to your DM.
talk to your DM.
Yeah.
You can also explore it in game. You
Definitely,
don't
yeah.
necessarily need to like have some very very over elaborate like backstory exploration just to put it in the campaign.
Like no, for sure. Like maybe just go into a tavern, be like, can I ask around for this person that I know from my backstory that could be in the city, or could I go to like the Artificers Guild to further pursue some things, or can I just go to the the office of this person to ask him questions, and
Right.
like you don't have to like. It's sometimes if you and the DM are on the same wavelength, you can very much lots of times just go around, and you don't have to really like explicitly ask them as much as just do it in the game, and and then lots of times it's gonna be obvious whether the DM like is willing to go that route or not, because given what they give you, it's not really a bad thing, really.
Yeah. Play your character like they're moving through their backstory.
Yeah.
Usually a DM, and again, one caveat: don't do this if it's very clear your party and the entire situation is moving in a certain direction.
Time sensitive events.
Exactly.
Like don't go on a side quest when you have like 2 hours on the clock to save the world.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Don't try to be the hero when right now your entire party is struggling to be like
Survive in general.
Yeah, survive.
If you're on the elemental plane of fire, you're not gonna go around asking, can I see if this person from my backstory? When you're in the city of Brass, you're looking around, and like you can't really like do any.
Right.
Like don't try to pursue. I guess don't is not really the best word, as much as like think of the circumstances and make an educated assumption based on the circumstances that maybe this is not the time.
Right.
And also asking the DM and being double checking with the DM if you have time or if you can do it is always really nice.
Right. And in that same note, whenever or along that same vein, whenever downtime opens up, make sure that you're proactive. Because a lot of times if I open up downtime, it's a lot of the times because I know some players are looking to
do
explore
downtime,
things.
yeah.
So if downtime opens up, downtime is probably your best chance to implement those things and kind of live collaborate with your DM, because this is also something that I really enjoy doing because it's a really good exercise in improvisation. I really like when people start tossing things from their backstory at me that I kind of have to remember, and then on top of that I have to kind of like work along depending on the situation. Obviously if I put them on downtime, I'm thinking about what they might talk to me about.
Definitely, yeah.
But it's interesting to be like, oh, here's a little side quest I'm going to develop like on the spot because you're asking me about this character and so heard about it.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to do them a favor before they talk. You can
You're
get
gonna have to
down the
maybe
rabbit
craft
hole.
them like this amulet, or you have to go like on your main quest. You're gonna have to go to, like, you're going to this dungeon. The side character asks you to retrieve something from that same dungeon as like a side thing, and you might go into like a trapped room or like a secondary thing that you might not have explored initially. And that stuff is like fine, and like it's a very nice way for like DMs to use like
Right.
as a tool. Like sometimes putting the side quest in the path of the main quest gives you some amount of like it makes stuff easier.
Yeah.
You compact, and makes stuff more comprehensive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we covered a good amount of things today on character creation.
Lots
We
of
talked
stuff,
a
yeah.
lot about backstory.
There's still a bunch we can probably cover in future episodes,
We
honestly.
can still go ham on this, but again, thank you to everyone that joined us
thanks for showing
in
up,
the
guys,
chat. Thank you for
Shout out to
asking
the viewers,
good
yeah.
questions. Shout out to y'all.
Yeah.
Again, reminder: we're gonna put out the polls. Usually the Sunday is after the episode.
And the polls are also in the bio of like. I'm pretty sure you scroll down. It should be like a link, a Google Forms link in the bio.
Yeah. So you can peep
somewhere.
our bio.
Oh no, it's in the socials.
There you go.
Yeah, future topic suggestions. It's right above the social link to the Discord server, and that should take you to the Google Forms for you to fill them out. If you want to, if you don't want to, if you just want to send, submit a form saying that like my glasses suck, it's okay.
Hey, if we take those.
Yeah.
But yeah, once again, thank you for joining us for episode 3. We will be.
Yeah.
We will not. I think we have to pre-record the next one because I'm not in Colorado.
Oh really?
Yeah. So we might have to move the timeline up a bit.
Yeah.
Might have to pre-record, but in any case,
we'll see you sometime.
We will be back. I will see you sometime not long in the future. Thank you for joining us, and so long.
See you.